Hey, this is Juan from Juan's Root Fishing. I do videos on conventional gear fishing, fly fishing, backpack fishing, kayak fishing, and all types of fishing. If you're interested in fishing, you love fishing, definitely subscribe to my channel, or at least stop by once in a while and see what I got going on, see what kind of videos I have. So today I want to talk to you about the best river fishing reel in terms of speed. I think it's really important for river anglers in particular to use high-speed reels. How do I define a high-speed reel? I really think anything that's cranking in over 30 inches of line per handle crank, 30 plus, is a high-speed reel. This is the one that one of the ones I use in the river. That's Curado 700. Not necessarily a E7. It's a 700 E7. Not necessarily the reel that I want to sell you on. It's basically the speed. This brings in about 31 inches of line per handle crank, which is super fast. The other reel I use in spinning reels, you can tell all my reels are high speed for river fishing, is a 300 size Lew's Match 2, and this will bring in 32 inches of line on a handle crank. And so you can see I'm above 30 inches on my reels. Now you say, like, why is that important in river fishing? Well, really there are three reasons that's important in river fishing I'll talk to you about. Number one is presentation. It has an effect on your river presentations. Number two, quick recovery. Fast reels allow you for quick recovery in a lot of different scenarios. Number three, less fatigue. You just have to crank less during the course of the day to accomplish the same things, and that's going to basically give you less fatigue. So let's go back to the presentation, talk specifically about some of those advantages. So in river fishing, a lot of times one of the best presentations, whether it be a spinnerbait, a crankbait, a chatterbait, or some other moving type bait, is upstream to downstream. And you've got to be able to not only pull that bait downstream at the speed of the current, you've got to be able to move that bait faster than the current, and it's really important to be able to do that to make the bait have action. And so with a high-speed reel, it's just a lot easier to be able to do that. Some instances the currents are so fast that without that high-speed reel you may not be able to get a good presentation, and so it helps you make better presentations in that upriver to downriver scenario, which is probably the best way you can, my classes I teach, if you can get an upriver to downriver presentation, that's where you want to be. It also allows you to burn baits across the top of the water column much easier. For example, boot tail swim bait. Those things in river fishing are fantastic to buzz right across the surface like a buzz bait. It takes a lot of speed to get one of those boot tails to lift up enough to get on top of that water column and stay on top of that water column. Obviously weight that you have in the bait makes a difference too, but again, if you want some weight to be able to cast farther or whatever, you've got to be able to get that bait up on surface. Again, high-speed reels allow you to do that. High-speed reels allow you to burn a buzz bait in a lot faster over the course of a day. It just allows you to move your baits a lot better and make a better fast presentation, which I've found is a lot more effective on bigger fish in river settings. So let's switch gears to quick recovery. What do I mean by quick recovery? Basically, one scenario is you're fishing a weed line, and you know those fish are right at the edge of that weed line in the river, and you're fishing some type of moving bait. And so basically you cast out, and you know that your strike zone is about right on that edge to 5 to 6 feet off that edge, and you're probably not, if you've determined that is a very strong pattern, you're probably not going to want to fish the bait the whole way to the boat. And so with a high-speed reel, you just crank it in. I mean, you're talking about almost 2 feet of line, almost 3 feet of line per handle crank when you're over 30 inches. And that's getting that bait in quicker so you can make another quick cast to that cover and just keep covering water. Especially if you're floating downriver, it just allows you to hit the target more on your way downriver. And that really adds up over the course of a day. The other thing it does is if you see an opportunity on the water, and where an angler is a successful angler, if you see an opportunity on the water, it allows you to get your bait in quickly and hit that opportunity. For example, many times in river fishing, we'll be fishing an area, and then all of a sudden, especially like in the fall, you'll see bait busting off to your left, and there's bass chasing. You know that you only have really seconds sometimes to hit that target area because those fish are moving with the bait fish. And so you've got to hit them right away. And so having that high-speed reel, again, it's no small thing to be cranking in almost 3 feet of line per handle crank, getting that bait in and shooting that bait out to those fish. And so you just have a much quicker recovery in those types of scenarios. The other quick recovery scenario is fish running at the boat, and that happens no matter if you're using a crankbait or moving bait, or even, like I use high-speed reels for my spinning reels. You could be fishing a tube. Fish picks up the tube. It's coming towards you. You got to catch up. Hit the fish. The fish keeps coming. You all know that scenario, and a lot of times you can't keep a tight line on that fish coming at your boat if you don't have a high-speed reel, and you end up not being able to keep pressure on that fish, and it shakes the bait free on its way into your boat. And so I find that with a high-speed spinning reel, bait caster, I can keep up with those fish a lot better. Again, no small thing. Almost 3 feet of line per handle crank is no small thing in the world of fishing, and you can really keep up with those fish, keep a bend in that rod, and keep that fish hooked on the end of your line. So that's quick recovery stuff. The third thing I talked about was less fatigue. Well, that stands to reason. If I'm river fishing and I'm fishing actively, I'm doing all those things, and I've got to crank twice as much, or a certain fraction as much over what I would crank with a high-speed reel, I'm going to be more fatigued at the end of the day. I'm going to be less focused, and I'm going to be less ready when that opportunity presents itself. So I find that my arms, my everything is like less, my wrist and everything working here, cranking all day long. It's no big deal with a high-speed reel. I can do it all day long because I got some speed there, and I don't have to just make so many handle cranks in a day, and it definitely adds up. Some guys say about some of the downside. So that's the 3 reasons. Some of the downside people talk about with high-speed reel is that if you want to get a crankbait on bottom and you want to crank it really slow, just slow down. You've got the best of both worlds there. You can barely move it. If you're cranking in 31 inches of line, 32 inches of line hand crank, you can barely move it, and you can keep that crankbait on bottom just hardly doing anything, and that allows you then to focus on what's going on down there and feel more. I find because I'm not having to crank that handle when I'm doing that slow rolling stuff and really getting grinding bottom with especially with my spinner baits, or with my crankbaits, I'm really grinding bottom with them. I'm doing less of this, which is interfering with my feel, and I can feel better. So I really don't buy into that thing where you need a low speed reel to get deep to keep that crankbait on bottom. I think just slow down, and then you have, like I said, the best of both worlds. You can go super fast, you can go super slow. It makes it really easy. The other thing I hear anglers talk about is, with a cranking, a low speed reel, I can crank those bass out of the cover and, off the log or whatever when you're river fishing. And I just say to that, it's like, I've never had trouble cranking in on braided and 10-pound, tests, just cranking in a fish that's, 4, 5, 6 pounds, and I just don't see, largemouth 7, 8 pounds. Like, they can't pull hard enough that you can't crank them in if your line's strong enough with a high-speed reel. There's just not a great difference in the mechanical advantage there. So I really don't think that's a thing. As a matter of fact, quite honestly, when I fished heavy cover with high-speed reels, I feel better about it because honestly, I can get that fish's head going in a direction and I can keep it going in a direction. I feel a lot quicker because I'm peeling in a lot more line and just leading that fish out of that cover. And so I think it's the exact opposite. I think it gives you an advantage again in terms of river fishing and maybe in other types of fishing because I've done lake fishing and so forth. So anyway, that's my recommendation for the best river fishing reel in terms of speed. Again, it's about presentation, it's about quick recovery, and it's about less fatigue. All those things are going to combine to make you a much better river angler.